I am Dr. Lisa Coleman. I'm the Senior Vice President for Global Inclusion and Strategic Innovation here at NYU, and I use she and her pronouns. I hope that everyone is taking very good care out there. We're thrilled to welcome you to Transformation Talks, where we spotlight leaders to learn from their journeys and gain knowledge about how to be agents working toward transformational change across our organizations. In the Office of Global Inclusion, we engage global diversity and inclusion principles with an intentional and intersectional focus on nimbleness, inclusivity, resilience, transformation, growth mindsets, design thinking, and adaptivity in our work. Transformation Talks is part of NYU's Be Together initiative on centering innovation, acting, and transforming together as a community. Today, we have the distinct honor of welcoming Vice Chancellor Jeffrey Lehman. Jeffrey Lehman is the Vice Chancellor of NYU Shanghai, where he oversees all academic and administrative operations. Lehman has previously served as the Dean of University of Michigan Law School, the 11th President of Cornell University, and the founding Dean of Peking University of Transnational Law. Prior to joining the University of Michigan Law School, he served as the law clerk to Frank M. Coffin, Chief Judge of the United States Court of Appeals for the First Circuit, and Associate Justice John Paul Stevens of the United States Supreme Court. He then spent 4 years at Kaplan and Drysdale, a Washington, D.C. law firm. Throughout his professional and academic career, Lehman has volunteered his time and energy to nonprofit organizations that share his commitments to the fields of higher education, law, and technology. Vice Chancellor Lehman received an undergraduate degree in mathematics from Cornell University, an MPP from the University of Michigan, and a JD from the University of Michigan Law School. He is a multi-award winner for his work in the US and abroad, including the Friendship Award, which is China's highest honor for, quote, foreign experts who've made an outstanding contributions to the country's economic and social progress, end quote. In 2018, Lehman was named one of the 40 most influential foreign experts in China during the 4 decades since the country began its process of reform and opening. Thank you again for being with us today, and it's a pleasure to welcome you, Vice Chancellor Lehman.
Thank you, Lisa. It's great to be here. Great to be here.
So we're just going to jump into the questions, and I'd like to start by beginning asking each of our guests we are featuring as part of this Transformation Talk series, as an accomplished leader and respected global leader and change agent, how do you define success, progress, or transformation within the context of global higher education?
So that's a great question, Lisa. I guess I should start by just expressing my appreciation to you for including me in this program. To me, organizational transformation is a matter of fundamental importance for all of us, both as individuals and as a community. And I think you're doing a great service by bringing together people who have a range of perspectives on the topic. So to me, the notions of success and progress and beneficial transformation in any context implies positive change, implies improvement, implies movement from a before state to an after state that is on balance better than the before state was. So to be able to claim progress, you need to have a way of assessing what makes one state of the world better or worse than another state of the world. You need a set of values that guide you, values that you can refer to when you're making that kind of assessment. So in the context of global higher education, those values are all about our students and their lives after they graduate. Our mission is to prepare our students to lead lives of personal satisfaction and societal contribution. We know that today's generation of students are likely to live for 70 or 80 years after they graduate. We want to be doing all we can to help them to develop the knowledge, the skills, and the virtues they will need in order to flourish for a very long time. Different people have different ideas about what that collection of knowledge, skills, and virtues might look like. I think people like me who are attracted to this kind of work are often opinionated about what the list looks like. And I I do have a checklist of my own, but the list has changed a bit since we entered the age of artificial intelligence and smart machines. So in a nutshell, I think that in the current age, every university graduate should have developed their capacities in the areas of algorithmic thinking, critical analysis, social perceptiveness, the ability to persuade, multicultural effectiveness, and creativity. So progress for a university means ensuring that tomorrow we're doing a better job at helping our students develop those qualities than we were doing yesterday.
Thank you so much, and what a terrific answer. And thank you for grounding us, right, in the importance of higher education and the work that we do. So my second question is, in our office, we work across the university campuses, disciplines, as you know. When we think about supporting the development of global leaders, which you just talked about, and whether that's in higher education, law, STEM. So could you talk a little bit more and expand a little bit about what you were talking about and talk about some of the core strengths and skills leaders need as they begin to grow and as they try to remain nimble and agile? And as you just talked about with information technology and things changing. And particularly also, as you know, we focus, and you mentioned this in your comments, on diversity, equity, inclusion, and multicultural awareness. So talk to us a little bit about the links that you see there.
So let me answer it this way. I think any leader who wants to help their organization to advance the values of global diversity, equity, inclusion, access, and belonging needs to be able to listen actively, to ask constructive questions, and to articulate suggestions in ways that are persuasive. So one way to think about the transformation that we are seeing today is to think about moving from a before state that was relatively simple to an after state that is more complex. So the before state was simple because it reflected only one slice of experience, only one slice of perspective within a community. Our goal is to transform the institution into one that honestly and fairly and accurately reflects multiple perspectives, perspectives that might sometimes be in tension with one another. So I often quote the poet John Keats. 200 years ago, he invented the term negative capability to describe the capacity to be in doubt, the capacity to be balancing inconsistent perspectives without irritable reaching after fact and reason. So psychologists call this uncomfortable situation of feeling pulled in different directions by inconsistent perspectives, they call it cognitive dissonance. And it's human nature to want to make cognitive dissonance go away, to want to say that one perspective is right and the other one is wrong, instead of valuing the tension. And so negative capability is the ability to repress the cognitive dissonance, to luxuriate in that tension and complexity of multiple perspectives. So we want to nurture negative capability in our institutions. We need, in order to do that, to be empathetic, to understand that this kind of change could be stressful for many members of our community, maybe not just the ones you would expect. So if a leader wants to embed the values of global diversity, equity, inclusion, access, and belonging into the culture of an organization, if they want to move from simplicity to complexity in this way, if they want to develop negative capability, they're going to be most successful if they can get everyone to own the change together. And that means empathizing with everyone in the community, working in partnership with them to develop a shared narrative, one through which they are able, in their own voices, to be advocates for changes that they might have initially perceived as stressful.
Thank you so much. You know, part of our Be Together initiative is so that we come together to work on these important issues and think about how we, in your words, own them together. So thank you again. Our next questions are really about your leadership journey. So I've said this a lot, and one thing that I love about higher education is transgenerational engagement and the kind of collaboration that occurs across generations. And you've already mentioned some of that. And I have a friend who asks a lot, what would your 8-year-old self think of you today? So given that our audience consists of cross and transgenerational group of emerging leaders, as you think about the arc of your career, what is one thing that you're most proud of? Or in other words, something that your 8-year-old self might think, wow, look at me today.
Well, well, yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this this notion of generations. My first grandchild just celebrated her first birthday, and so I'm very much feeling like I'm in a different generation than I usually have thought of myself as inhabiting. But Lisa, I guess I would say to your question, over the course of my career, I have had the opportunity to work in challenging and gratifying roles with some fantastic organizations. And in each one of them, I have been lucky to be part of a team where I worked together with very gifted colleagues who taught me a lot. And I guess one experience that I would point to that was especially challenging and also especially gratifying happened in the 1990s and early 2000s when I served as the dean of the University of Michigan Law School. During that time, our school was sued, and in fact, I personally was named as a defendant by a woman who applied for admission and did not get in. She argued that because our admissions process acted affirmatively to advance the goal of having a diverse student body, we were engaged in unconstitutional discrimination against her on the basis of her race. That litigation lasted for many years. We lost in the trial court, then we won in the Court of Appeals. Ultimately, we won in the Supreme Court. Because I was the dean, and because I'd been a member of the committee that drafted the admissions policy that included affirmative action, I was a public spokesperson in defense of what we were doing. Some parts of the role were not so much fun. People who disagreed with affirmative action denounced me on television. They said I was an evil person. I even got death threats. But a big part of what was gratifying about being in that role was that I had a chance to learn a lot about persuasion. Some people who were critical of our use of affirmative action believed quite sincerely that it was damaging to our society for institutions to make decisions where a person's race could affect their access to an opportunity. Some of them had been active participants in the civil rights movement in the 1960s, and they had seen the dangers of certain kinds of race-based decision-making. And it was hugely gratifying to me that we were able over time to move some of them to understand what we were doing and why. Once we did the hard work of understanding where they were coming from without demonizing them, we were able to craft our arguments in ways that first acknowledged their concerns, then pointed to another commitment that they all held alongside their commitment to colorblindness, and that was a commitment to integration. They wanted to live in an integrated world. And in a world where we were being forced to choose colorblindness or integration, we were choosing integration. And ultimately, that turned out to be the argument that prevailed in the Supreme Court. So that was a wonderfully challenging, but also very, very gratifying experience for me.
Thank you so much. And thank you for talking about how things that are challenging can also be gratifying and for the scoping out the arc of that. My next question is, as we know, there's much research that demonstrates that innovation and diversity, equity, inclusion there's a linkage there. And thinking about, and to go back to some of the work that you talked about even earlier about how we can come together in collaboration and thinking about how we innovate together. So could you talk to us a little bit about your role as Vice Chancellor and what role innovation has played in your work as you think about the work that you've been doing, particularly in the work in Shanghai, and then maybe even linking it to some of your earlier work?
Sure. Well, Lisa, the research that you described has actually been quite inspiring to me, and it in fact played an important part in how we designed NYU Shanghai 10 years ago. One of the things we did was to build in a program on creativity and innovation, which we call PCI. And as part of that program, I teach a course on creativity. Other people teach classes on design thinking. Others teach classes on entrepreneurship. And through these classes, our students read this literature and they understand the importance to innovation of immersing themselves in diverse communities in order to better develop their own capacities. Another thing that we did when we were creating NYU Shanghai was to make multicultural effectiveness an explicit objective that we want all of our students to pursue. So in the first year, we assign every student a roommate who grew up in a different culture. And we are explicit in saying we want everyone to spend at least 2 hours every day in serious conversation with a classmate whose initial culture of birth was different from their initial culture of birth. I would also say that at the level of our leadership team, we are very fortunate to have an exceptionally diverse and talented group. And for us, that meant that when COVID first hit, which here in Shanghai, we started dealing with it back in January of 2020. I honestly think that our diversity helped us to develop a strategy that was successful, that enabled us to adapt and pivot quickly in quite innovative ways so that our students could be able to keep learning notwithstanding the pandemic.
Thank you again. Thank you again. And for underscoring all of those important points and the links, and particularly talking about as NYU Shanghai was developed, the core of what you were thinking about in terms of the linkages between innovation and of course diversity. And so lastly, I know I can't believe it's our last question, but lastly, given your leadership journey, could you share a piece of advice or something that you wish you had been given or known, something that sustains you and has sustained you or gives you joy that you wish you had known or experienced? You know, I think some of us, there are things we wish we had known earlier in our career journeys. So if there's something like that that you would like to share with our audience, especially our emerging leaders, that would be terrific as well.
Sure. Well, Lisa, I do feel blessed to have been able to enjoy the opportunities that I've had in my career, and especially the chance I've had to be working here in China for the last 13 years. I would say that at this stage in my career, looking backwards, I derive tremendous vicarious satisfaction from the experiences of people I used to work with who then went on to serve themselves in leadership positions at other institutions. And I think when I was starting out in leadership roles, my instinct, whenever someone I worked with was offered a new opportunity, was to fight like crazy to keep them. To persuade them to turn that opportunity down and stay here, and we're doing something great together. And I wish I had understood at that time that that instinct is wrong. even when an amazing colleague leaves, I can find a way to ensure that my institution keeps going forward. And the truth is that that colleague never disappears completely. We've stayed connected. It turns out that the relationship and the network is enormously helpful in ways I never would have imagined. And so when someone has an opportunity, that's great, that's wonderful. And if anything, an important part of being in roles like these is to try to help your colleagues to secure those kinds of opportunities for themselves. And I wish I'd known that earlier.
I think many of us we try to hold on. We try to hold on to those people because, you know, we want to, as you talked about before, when we create great teams, we want to hold on to those great teams. So, but that is a great piece of advice, Jeff, and of course something that we all learn as we go forward. I just want to thank you so much for participating in this talk with me today. Thank you to our audience for joining us. We hope that you will follow the Office of Global Inclusion for more transformation talks, as well as updates, events, programs, and resources, and that you will continue to partner with us as we advance our efforts to advance institutional excellence. And of course, check out the YouTube channel. Thanks again for being with us today, and we look forward to seeing you again at future events.